The Minnesota Timberwolves just traded for Lamelo Ball for a package that included Naz Reid, a 2033 unprotected first-round pick, 3 first-round pick swaps in 2028, 2029, 2030, and 3 second-round picks in 2029, 2032, and 2033. An absolute haul for the Hornets and an absolute shocker to the basketball world, as it came out of nowhere right after the draft ended. There was a lot to talk about here. First, I'm going to start with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I am going to be reading off my notes here. I have a lot of prep notes and a lot of stuff to talk about. So if you see me looking down, I'm just making sure I stay on track and cover absolutely everything that I wanted to. The Timberwolves are now all in on Anthony Edwards' championship window. This trade makes it clear that the franchise is prioritizing winning now over preserving future assets. Minnesota gave up Naz Reid, future draft capital, and financial flexibility because they believed they're firmly in their championship window, rather than waiting for young players to develop and protecting future picks. The front office made an aggressive move to improve their roster immediately. This was with the intent of pairing Anthony Edwards with an elite shot creator to ease his offensive workload. For most of his career, Edwards has been asked to initiate almost everything for the Wolves. I know when Towns was there, Towns would do a little bit more, but now without Towns, it's kind of all on Ant to create and sort of get everything going as the engine of this offense. But now with Lamelo Ball running the offense, Edwards can spend more time attacking scrambling defenses, cutting without the ball, and conserving energy for defense in late game situations, instead of constantly creating from scratch. An absolute plus this trade is Ant even came out and was complaining about the amount of double teams he was seeing just due to the lack of creation that was on this lineup with him. He honestly had nobody and he was having to take a lot of those big shots, having to make a lot out of nothing, and it was not working. And now Minnesota's betting that a true co-star can give Edwards the best chance to compete for a title in his prime. All these championship teams have had multiple elite creators. This goes back as long as I can even think of. Ball gives the Wolves another player capable of taking over stretches offensively, creating shots for teammates, and carrying the offense when Edwards rests, making Minnesota much less dependent on one superstar. This is huge for Ant as he thrives moving off ball. He's not really a dominant primary ball handler guy at all times. He definitely has the ability to be, and he can break down his defender whenever he wants to, but he's not a primary playmaker, and that's sort of what was hurting his offensive game in the last few years. Minnesota now has that point guard they've been missing, and it's an all-star point guard at that. This is huge for not just the team, but for Anthony Edwards' success as a player as well. Ball is one of the NBA's best transition passers and excels in creating easy offense. Few guards throw hit-ahead passes or push the pace like Ball does. His willingness to advance the ball immediately after rebounds should create easy baskets for Edwards and Minnesota's wings, especially Jaden McDaniels, who runs the floor very well. This will allow the Wolves to score before opposing defense can even get set, which honestly was an issue last year. There was a lot of times where they would just have to resort to iso ball or pick and roll stuff, and it wasn't working. Minnesota thrived when they were able to run their set or even get transition buckets all game. But they can settle in the pick and roll offense now because of how well Ball can read a pick and roll and force defenses to make difficult decisions because he's capable of scoring, throwing lobs, and finding open shooters off a pick and roll situation. And that's to pair with Rudy Gobert, who's a great screen setter. This will create more efficient opportunities for Minnesota's supporting cast, while making life easier for players like Rudy Gobert as a rim runner, as I just mentioned. Another thing I mentioned a little bit earlier, but Edwards can play more off ball, allowing him to attack a defense that is already in rotation. Instead of facing loaded defenses every possession, Edwards can receive the ball after ball is already broken down the defense. This means more driving lanes, clear catch and shoot opportunities, and fewer difficult isolation possessions where he doesn't really thrive, but can definitely be a pro and be very good at doing that. I'm really looking forward to seeing Anthony Edwards work off ball as well as Lamelo Ball working off ball. They're both kind of guys that can come off screens and hit shots or move off ball, get open, and create offense in their own way. So it's going to be really interesting to see these two play together in the backcourt. There is one clear downside to this trade though, and it's the fact that the trade is a gamble on health rather than talent. When healthy, Ball is proven to produce at an all-star level, and Ball is one of the league's most creative offensive guards, capable of averaging around 25 points and 8+ assists while making teammates significantly better. His talent has never been questioned, it's always been about his availability. We've seen a lot of seasons where they've been cut short. He can't even play half the games because of injuries. Last year, the Charlotte kind of figured out what to do with him. They had him coming off the bench sometimes, they had him starting, just sort of preserve his minutes and his load. And it was helping. He played, I think, the most games he's played in 3 or 4 years. And it helped with the team's success. But just further on that point, his injury history is a major question surrounding this acquisition. Multiple ankle injuries have limited Ball throughout the last several seasons, preventing him from building consistency and making it difficult for Charlotte to compete. Minnesota's accepting that risk because players with Ball's offensive ceiling rarely become available. He's an absolute ceiling riser and is going to make every single player on this team better. The upside is ridiculously enormous. A healthy Ball beside Edwards gives the Timberwolves arguably one of the league's most explosive backcourts, because their combination of scoring, playmaking, transition offense, and shot creation could elevate Minnesota into NBA's top offensive tier. Something they haven't really seen lately is they've been primarily a defensive type of team. Another risk they're taking is losing Naz Reid, who leaves a significant hole in their front court. His ability to score and stretch the floor made him one of the league's best six-men and a very valuable piece to this lineup. He consistently punished opposing second units with his scoring ability. He could post up small defenders, knock down three-pointers, and attack slower bigs off the dribble, and was an incredible finisher around the hoop. They didn't call him Big Jelly for no reason. He gave Minnesota lineup flexibility that few bench bigs could provide. And now they have less depth behind Rudy Gobert and fewer lineup combinations to use. Without Reed, the Wolves lose an option to play a 5-out lineup with a floor-spacing center, or comfortably survive games with Gobert's off the floor. Their front court rotation becomes much thinner and far less versatile. It's kind of funny because last season you saw the Wolves have kind of a logjam there with Randall, Reed, Gobert, kind of trying to find a way to play all three of them during the game and not really hurt anyone else's minutes or hurt anyone else's production. And now they come down to relying heavily on Rudy Gobert and the development of Johan Berenger. A complete different situation than they were in last season, so I definitely think there's more roster moves coming. But to round out the trade talk on this sense, Minnesota dramatically raises both its ceiling and its risks. The Wolves now have one of the league's most dynamic offensive backcourts, with Ball's passing and creativity, combined with Edwards' elite scoring ability, giving Minnesota multiple ways to attack defenses. Opponents can no longer focus solely on Edwards, because Ball is capable of controlling an offense himself. As I mentioned earlier, they've also tied most of their future to a player with lots of durability concerns. If Ball continues to miss significant time, Minnesota will have sacrificed important depth and draft assets without fully realizing the benefits of the trade. It is a move that comes with substantial downside if injuries persist, and I hope for the sake of the Wolves, this is not the case. I really think they figured something out with Lamelo Ball last year in Charlotte, so if the Wolves can kind of replicate that, I think it's smooth sailing from there. But Minnesota is not making this trade simply to improve slightly. They're trying to become a legit championship favorite, and if this pairing works, this deal could reshape the balance of the power in the Western Conference. But looking into the rest of the offseason for the Wolves now, the trade dramatically changed Minnesota's financial outlook. Because the Lamelo Ball deal was structured as an expansion of the earlier Julius Randle trade, the Wolves now no longer receive that $33 million trade player exception that they were expected to have. Instead, they're back over the luxury tax and are hard capped at the second apron, limiting the flexibility they have to add talent. But the biggest hole now, instead of point guard, is now the depth at front court. By trading away both Julius Randle and Naz Reid, Minnesota has significantly weakened its power forward rotation. Jaden McDaniels is likely going to slide over to the 4, but behind him there isn't really a proving option, making frontcourt depth arguably the team's biggest remaining weakness and something they absolutely need to address in more moves. But as I mentioned earlier, another trade feels increasingly likely before the season begins. The Wolves have several wings like now Josh Green, Dante DiVincenzo, and rookie Isaiah Evans with overlapping skill sets. Green or DiVincenzo could be moved in a follow-up deal to acquire a true power forward, but the team already came out and said they do not want to trade Dante DiVincenzo. Tim Connolly will continue to reshape the roster around Anthony Edwards and now Lamelo Ball, but the challenge is that Minnesota has very little draft capital left, meaning young players like Terrence Shannon Jr. may need to be included in a future trade. There's a lot to think about here for the Wolves. They really need to bring in another big man piece. I mean, there are some free agents available, but they don't have the money to sign them. They're going to need to make some moves trade-wise, maybe a sign and trade with somebody to figure out what they're going to do. Now moving on to the Charlotte Hornets side. Charlotte is moving in a new direction as a franchise. The Hornets are ending the LaMelo Ball era after years of inconsistent results. Ball produced plenty of highlights and individual success, but Charlotte never found sustained team success during his tenure. Injuries and roster instability ultimately convinced the organization it was time for a fresh start. Rather than building around one injury-prone star, they're emphasizing roster balance. Charlotte is now constructing a roster with more dependable contributors, better depth, and greater lineup flexibility, and they have definitely signaled a shift towards long-term stability. The Hornets appear to be focused on building a sustainable winner instead of chasing upside alone, adding reliable veterans and future draft assets to reflect a patient approach to the roster construction to hopefully build on what they had going last season. And Naz Reid is an ideal fit for Charlotte's young core. He brings toughness, versatility, and reliable production every single night, and develops into one of the NBA's most dependable frontcourt players, providing scoring, rebounding, and physicality regardless of whether he starts or comes off the bench. I think the biggest upside of his addition is his ability to shoot from the perimeter and create spacing for their offense. Unlike many traditional centers, Reid can consistently stretch defenses beyond the three-point line and open up driving lanes for Charlotte's young perimeter players, guys like a Brandon Miller, and this will make the offense way less predictable. He immediately strengthens both the starting lineup and the team's overall depth. Whether Charlotte decides to start him or keep him in a six-man role, he'll improve their frontcourt rotation immediately while giving the coaching staff more lineup options than they had previously. And now we're looking at Brandon Miller possibly becoming the face of this franchise. The offense can fully shift towards Miller's continued development, especially with the ball no longer dominating possessions. Miller will have more opportunities to initiate offense, make decisions with the ball, and develop into a true primary option, and he should see more opportunities as both a scorer and a secondary playmaker. The ball will now be in his hands a lot more often, and will allow him to grow not only as a three-level scorer, but also as a creator for teammates. I know that's not really his game, but he's shown flashes and can definitely be that kind of player for them. And this just emphasizes their clear long-term foundation to build around. Rather than splitting the franchise direction between multiple stars, the Hornets can now fully commit to building a roster that complements Miller's strength over the coming years. It's honestly going to come down to who they want to build around, whether it's him or Concanapple. Both players are good options, and honestly, they can be a 1A, 1B type of thing, just like what the Celtics are doing with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I do want to talk about the draft assets. The biggest piece is probably the unprotected first in 2033. Because the pick swaps are not going to be super valuable. I honestly think the Hornets and the Wolves are going to be kind of in the same area for the next few years. The Wolves might win a little bit more games than the Hornets, but their pick swaps are probably going to both be in that 20 to 30 range. so it's not going to make too much of a difference in the draft there. Both teams are going to get solid picks at the end of the first round there, and I don't think the pick swaps are going to be as big of a piece of this trade as everyone thinks they're going to be. The second round draft capital is definitely going to be helpful in trades for acquiring like veteran pieces or kind of role-playing pieces throughout the league, and by the time the first round pick comes around in 2033, who knows where both teams stand. The Wolves could be in a completely different situation, the Hornets could be in a completely different situation, so I have no idea what to expect from that pick there. However, the Hornets can use these draft picks to kind of address a trade and bring in another major star or even just another helpful role-playing player. They aren't really locked into one path, and now they have flexibility to continue rebuilding through the draft or even accelerate the process by trading those assets for established players. I think that's the way they should go, because these picks are not going to be super crazy for them. The Wolves are going to be good. They shouldn't really count on these picks turning into anything super special. I mean, there are good late-round talent players, but it's nothing to sit on and sort of hope for and look forward to. So I think the best case scenario is them using these picks to try and acquire more talent to fill out their roster. But it was very clear the Hornets prioritized consistency over star power. Ball offered elite offensive flashes but struggled to stay on the floor consistently. Even though he looked like one of the NBA's premier young point guards, injuries repeatedly interrupted his development and prevented Charlotte from building continuity around him. They believe a deeper, more dependable roster will produce better long-term results, rather than having one player carrying the whole offensive load. The Hornets are aiming for a more balanced team with contributors across the rotation who can be counted on throughout an 82-game season, and they definitely did that by locking down Coby White on that extension right after the trade came out. And even further on top of that, they drafted 2 NBA-ready players in Christian Anderson and Haynes Steinbach. Christian Anderson is probably the best playmaker on the team now, and will definitely get some point guard minutes, maybe even start. It depends on what they want to do with Coby White. And Haynes Steinbach can come in and be that another stretch 5, stretch 4 kind of player for them. He brings great rebounding. Defensive versatility isn't really there yet, but he showed flashes of it that it can grow. They have 2 really solid foundational players at the big man position, alongside their already solidified core of Moussa Diabate and Ryan Kalkbrenner. So they went from having a hole at big to now having 4 options to play there. Moussa Diabate is kind of restricted to the big, and so is Kalkbrenner. So I think Haynes Steinbach and Naz Reid will kind of flip-flop on that 4 position, especially after I saw reports that Miles Bridges might be gone in the offseason, whether that's via trade or whatever happens there. But I went from thinking that Christian Anderson was going to be stuck in this logjam of guards in Charlotte to now being a possible starter for this team. He's absolutely the best playmaker and has clear elite scoring skills to create for himself. I think Coby White gets the nod initially to be the starter, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year we see Christian Anderson in that starting lineup and Coby White operating in that 6-man role and being a great 6-man of the year type of candidate. But moving into the offseason for the Hornets now, it's shifted towards asset management and long-term team construction. Their offseason now revolves around reorganizing the rebuild timeline. With Ball no longer defining the roster, the Hornets can fully structure their next phase around Brandon Miller and their young core like Con Knuppel and all those other pieces we saw there. Every offseason move will now be about clarity of direction rather than balancing competing timelines. Cap flexibility and draft capital become the centerpiece of their strategy. The Hornets enter the offseason with more picks, more trade flexibility, and fewer long-term financial commitments tied to one star. That opens the door for future consolidation trades or patient draft development, depending on how quickly they want to accelerate this rebuild. And based on what they were building last season at the end of the year, I think they want to accelerate this as fast as they can. This is definitely a team that can compete for a playoff spot, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I see them in the playoffs next season. All in all, this is a trade that came out of nowhere, and I'm now really looking forward to the offseason, as we've already seen 3 trades, and free agency hasn't even started. Let me know what you guys think of this trade, whether you're a Wolves fan or a Hornets fan. I'd love to see a fan's perspective on what they think of the team now, but for the most part, I'm really looking forward to seeing this backcourt duo of Anthony Edwards and Lamelo Ball. I think they can do some serious damage in that Western Conference.